Have you noticed your elderly loved ones starting to show small but worrying changes over the past year? Many people think that death in old age comes suddenly. But in reality, the body often sends silent warnings months, sometimes even a year, before death arrives. The problem is that most of us overlook them because they seem trivial at first. It's only when we look back that we realize the signs were clear, but by then it's too late to prepare mentally or make those final memories. In this video, we'll point out the 5 key signs that typically appear a year before an elderly person in the US passes away. Some of you may have noticed them, but thought they were just due to aging. Others are subtle changes that signal the body is gradually weakening. Recognizing them early helps you care for them better, cherish every moment with them, and ensure they live comfortably until the end. Watch the whole video because these 5 signs will help you prepare better. Before we dive into the story, please comment below where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our latest stories. Let's get started. As I mentioned in the intro, the elderly body often sends silent signals before entering its final stage, and the first sign we'll explore today is significant weight loss. This is one of the most subtle changes, but also the most obvious, if you pay attention. Imagine a loved one, maybe a grandparent or parent, who used to be healthy, loved family meals, but now their clothes are starting to hang loose, their face is hollowing out, and they no longer care for their favorite foods. You think it's just aging? You maybe not. Meet Mr. Harold, an 87-year-old man living in rural Montana. He used to be a miner, a strong man with sturdy hands from years of working underground. His family, especially his son Jack, was always proud that he stayed so full of life even after retiring years ago. Every weekend, they'd gather around the table with roasted venison, Harold's favorite dish since he was young. But about a year ago, Jack started noticing something odd. Harold wasn't finishing his portions anymore. He'd nibble a few bites, then push the plate aside, saying not that hungry. At first Jack thought he was just getting pickier, or maybe age was changing his tastes. But a few months later, Harold had dropped a full 20 pounds. His belt needed extra holes. His winter coat hung loose, and his face had hollowed out so much that Jack barely recognized his father in recent family photos. Unintentional weight loss like this isn't uncommon among the elderly, especially in the US, where average life expectancy is rising, but health in the final years often declines. According to the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention (CDC), over 30% of people over 65 experience unwanted muscle loss, called sarcopenia, in their last years. But for Harold, it wasn't just typical muscle loss. His body was signaling that it wasn't functioning like it used to. Nutrients weren't being absorbed efficiently. Muscles were wasting away quickly, and the body's essential systems were starting to slow down. So why does this happen? Science gives us the answer. As someone enters their final stage of life, their body gradually loses the ability to process protein, essential for maintaining muscle and strength. The digestive system weakens too, no longer breaking down food into energy like it once did. With Harold, Jack noticed his father wasn't eating much anymore, even when he tried making special dishes like blueberry pie or chicken soup, things that used to make Harold smile just from the smell. But now he'd just shake his head and say, "It doesn't taste good." It wasn't that he was picky. His body wasn't sending hunger signals to his brain like it used to. The appetite, the thing that once got Harold excited for every meal, was gone. In the US, this is even more common because of lifestyle and a healthcare system that sometimes lets small signs slip by. Jack took Harold to the family doctor in Montana. Covered by Medicare, the doctor said he had mild malnutrition and prescribed some vitamins. Jack didn't think it was a big deal. He just thought his dad was getting old. In reality, unintentional weight loss is rarely a good sign. It's often tied to deeper issues, like chronic diseases the family hasn't noticed yet. Cancer, heart failure, or kidney disease, leading causes of death in the US according to the American Medical Association (AMA), often start with weight loss before more obvious symptoms show up. For Harold, a few months later, the doctor found he had early-stage kidney failure, but by then his body was too weak to recover. Harold's story isn't unique. I once heard a friend talk about her grandmother in Seattle, who went from 150 pounds to 110 pounds in 8 months. The family thought she was just eating less because of age, but later they found out she had colon cancer. Looking back, they wish they'd noticed sooner. Weight loss isn't just about pounds. It reduces muscle strength, makes moving harder, and weakens the immune system. With Harold, Jack noticed his dad couldn't stand steady anymore, walking from the living room to the yard. One time, he nearly fell trying to pick up the morning paper. But it's not just physical. The mental shift is worrying too. Harold started avoiding big family meals. He'd say, "Don't want to bother everyone," when Jack tried to get him to join the table. He'd made me think of another side of weight loss. It's not just the body weakening, but a sign the elderly are pulling back from life. In the U.S., where independence is so valued, many like Harold feel ashamed when they're not strong anymore. They don't want to be a burden, so they stay quiet, and families sometimes don't see the problem until it's too late. So what can families do when they spot this sign? Jack tried everything with Harold. He bought protein shakes, cooked easy dishes like oatmeal, even brought in favorites from a local Montana diner. But Harold still didn't gain weight. Jack felt helpless, not knowing the issue wasn't just diet. When the body prepares for the end, forcing more food sometimes doesn't help, and can even cause discomfort. Instead, experts from the American Geriatric Society, AGS, suggest focusing on comfort. Light, easy-to-swallow foods like warm soup or fruit juice, along with keeping them hydrated, can improve quality of life more than pushing big meals. Digging deeper, weight loss ties into other physical changes. Appetite dropping isn't just age. It's a sign the body is shutting down. In the U.S., where chronic diseases cause over 70% of deaths in people over 65, according to the CDC, weight loss is often the first overlooked symptom. With Harold, Jack realized his dad couldn't taste flavors anymore. He used to love the smell of grilling meat, but now he'd just shrug when Jack asked if it was good. It's a sign the nervous and digestive systems aren't working well, a step toward full decline. Think about it. Have you seen this in your loved ones? A loose shirt, a half-eaten meal, or tired eyes when they skip dessert. With Harold's family, Jack wishes he'd noticed sooner. He remembers the last time Harold laughed big over venison, 2 years ago, when he was still strong. Now seeing his frail dad in the armchair, Jack knows weight loss isn't just physical. It's a message from the body that time is running short. If you see an elderly loved one losing weight without trying, especially if they're eating less, getting weak, or struggling to move, don't ignore it. It's not just about looks. Their body is saying something. Understanding this message helps you prepare better, offer timely care, and turn those last moments into cherished memories. Harold's weaker every day now, but Jack decided not to force him to eat anymore. Instead, he sits by his dad, recounting old hunting stories from Montana, something Harold still smiles at. Significant weight loss is the first warning, clearer than you think. Don't let it pass as just part of aging. Pay attention, because time doesn't wait. Next, we'll move to the second sign. An even more striking change. We just talked about Harold in Montana, and how he lost significant weight over the past year, a sign his son Jack initially missed. But why is weight loss such a big warning? It's not just about dropping a few pounds or clothes getting loose. It's a sign the body is quietly shifting to a new phase, where vitality can't be maintained like before. First, unintentional weight loss weakens resistance. With Harold, Jack noticed his dad got colds more easily, though he rarely got sick before. Losing muscle and fat, the body's natural shields, left him prone to infections, from common flu to more serious issues, like pneumonia. A top reason for hospital stays among those over 65 in the U.S., per the CDC. Harold's immune system was now like a flimsy door, barely holding off outside threats. Second, weight loss ups the risk of mobility issues, a major danger for the elderly. Jack said Harold nearly fell picking up the paper, his legs shaking because his muscles couldn't support him anymore. The American Geriatric Society notes falls are a leading cause of death for seniors in the U.S., and weight loss makes it worse. Harold's body wasn't just lighter, it was frailer than ever. But most crucially, weight loss signals the body is preparing for the end. It's not just eating less or losing appetite. It's a sign internal systems, from digestion to nerves, are slowing. Jack realized forcing Harold to eat more didn't help. He wasn't hungry, not because he was picky, but because his body didn't need energy like before. Experts suggest focusing on comfort instead. With Harold, Jack started bringing warm, easy soups instead of big meals. He kept him hydrated with herbal tea, something he still enjoyed sipping. Weight loss is a warning because it doesn't happen alone. It triggers a full decline. If you see a loved one thinning fast, watch for other signs. Are they more tired? Forgetting things? With Harold, Jack wishes he'd acted sooner, not just with a doctor's visit, but by listening to what his dad's body was saying. Don't overlook this sign. It's the start of a journey you can prepare for to offer comfort instead of regret. We just covered the first sign, significant weight loss, through Harold's story in Montana, and how Jack slowly saw his dad's body sending warning signals. Now let's move to the second sign, extreme fatigue and weakness. If weight loss is the body losing vitality, extreme fatigue is when energy is completely drained. This isn't the passing sleepiness after a busy day, but a deep, lasting exhaustion that makes even small tasks like standing up or talking feel impossible. Picture a loved one, once full of life, now sitting silently, eyes weary, too tired for things they used to love. What causes it? That's what we'll explore today. Meet Mrs. Margaret, 82, living in Seattle, Washington. She was once a nurse, a strong woman always busy caring for patients during her 40-year career. After retiring, she kept her routine, waking early, brewing hot coffee, sitting by the window with a book, sometimes watching the light rain. A Seattle favorite, her granddaughter Emily would visit weekends, bringing waffles from a Pike Place Market bakery. Those visits were full of laughter, with Margaret sharing funny hospital tales. But about a year ago, Emily noticed something off. One Sunday morning, she arrived to find Margaret still in bed, not out of laziness, but because she said, "I'm too tired, Emily. I don't want to do anything today." At first, Emily thought she just needed more rest. Margaret was old, and who doesn't get tired sometimes, right? But the fatigue didn't fade. Weeks later, Emily visited and saw she wasn't up early anymore. Instead of coffee at 7 a.m., she sat in bed until 10, eyes half closed, holding a cup but not drinking. Emily asked, "Want to walk around the block? It's nice out," but Margaret shook her head, voice faint. "I don't have the strength, dear." Walking from the living room to the kitchen, less than 20 steps, left her gasping, leaning on the wall. Emily noticed she stopped reading. The thick novels she once devoured gathered dust, and instead of books, she sat in her armchair, staring out the window, sometimes dozing off mid-conversation. Emily grew worried, but Margaret just smiled faintly, saying, "It's old age, don't mind it." But this wasn't just typical aging. In the U.S., extreme fatigue is one of the most common signs in the elderly during their final year. The American Geriatric Society, AGS, says over 50% of those over 80 experience prolonged exhaustion that rest can't fix. For Margaret, Emily didn't know this stemmed from deep changes in her body. As we age, the heart pumps blood less efficiently, circulation drops, and muscles don't get enough oxygen to work normally. That's why Margaret felt so drained. A few steps felt like climbing a mountain, because her body lacked the energy for even the simplest needs. But it wasn't just circulation draining her. Metabolism slows drastically at this age too. The human body is built to produce and use energy, but in the final stage, it shifts to conservation mode. For Margaret, energy once spent brewing coffee, chatting with Emily, or tending her little backyard garden, was now reserved for basic functions, like breathing or staying warm. Emily noticed she slept more, even napping midday for no reason. Once, she woke from a short nap, looked at Emily with hazy eyes, and said, "I don't know why I'm so tired."
Dad hit Emily hard.
Margaret wasn't just tired. She was losing vitality day by day. Science gives us more detail. As organs weaken, the body stops making energy efficiently. Margaret's heart wasn't beating as strong. Her lungs weren't exchanging oxygen well, and her muscles were shrinking from malnutrition, a follow-up from the weight loss we covered earlier. It's a vicious cycle. Fatigue made her eat less, eating less made her weaker, and weakness made her more tired. Emily tried helping with easy foods, like potato soup or oatmeal, But Margaret only took a few bites before stopping, saying, "I'm not hungry." Emily didn't realize her hunger was fading too. Another sign her body didn't need much energy anymore. The impact of extreme fatigue isn't just physical, it hits the spirit too. Margaret was once proud of her independence, a value big in American culture. She loved doing things herself, laundry, sweeping the porch, even knitting sweaters for Emily, every Christmas. But now, she couldn't even put on those sweaters she'd made. One rainy afternoon, Emily saw her try to dress but stop halfway, Kia panting, whispering, "I'm so useless, Emily." It stabbed Emily's heart. Margaret wasn't lazy or giving up. She just had no strength left. This fatigue didn't just sap her energy. It took away the joys and meaning in her life. In the U.S., the pressure to stay independent makes many elderly, like Margaret, hide their weakness. She didn't want Emily worrying, so she'd say, "I'm fine, don't fuss." But extreme fatigue isn't something willpower or positivity can beat. Emily thought more rest, coffee or fresh air would help. She didn't know rest couldn't fix it. Margaret's body was saving energy for its final days, and nothing could change that. Margaret's story isn't alone. I heard of Mr. Henry, a Texas farmer, who mowed his lawn daily for 60 years. In his last year, he couldn't get out of his chair to do it. His grandson thought he was lazy, but they later found he had heart failure, a top killer in the U.S., per the CDC. Extreme fatigue often pairs with chronic diseases like heart failure, lung issues, or even cancer, silently draining the elderly's energy. For Margaret, Emily finally took her to the doctor after months of worry. They found her heart function declining, but by then her body was too frail for heavy drugs or surgery. So what can families do when they see this sign? Emily tried getting Margaret to walk lightly around the house, thinking movement would boost her, but she only managed a few steps before sitting, breathing hard, hand on her chest. Emily called the doctor, but Margaret refused the hospital, saying, "I just need a little rest." The AGS experts say forcing activity isn't always good here. Instead, let them rest when needed. Emily accepted this, setting up a softer armchair by the window, so Margaret could watch the rain, something she still loved in Seattle. She brought a warm blanket too, since Margaret often felt cold, another hint her circulation was fading. This extreme fatigue affects communication too. Margaret spoke less, sometimes just nodding, when Emily asked questions. Once, Emily shared her workday, but Margaret dozed off mid-story, head slumped on the chair. Emily felt a pang of sadness, but soon understood. She wasn't indifferent, she just couldn't keep up. In the U.S., where family talks are a big deal, this withdrawal can feel like losing them before they're gone. Emily missed the days. Margaret laughed loud about old patients, but now she was silent, eyes distant. If you see a loved one persistently tired, unrested even after sleep, take note. It's not laziness or lack of drive. Their body's slowing, gearing up for the end. With Margaret, Emily wishes she'd seen it sooner. She recalls mornings when Margaret brewed coffee, poured her a cup, and said, "Drink up before it cools." Now watching her sit still by the window, Emily knows time's short. Understanding this sign keeps you from being caught off guard, and more importantly, lets you create peaceful moments with them, instead of trying to fix the unfixable. Margaret spends more time by the window, now, and Emily stays close, not pushing her anymore. She just wants her comfortable, sometimes retelling old tales of Seattle's rainy days that Margaret loved. Extreme fatigue reminds us time's finite, and the most precious thing you can do is be there, listen, and bring comfort. Stick around, because next we'll tackle the third sign, an even deeper shift in this journey. We just talked about Mrs. Margaret in Seattle, and how extreme fatigue changed her life, from an energetic nurse to a woman who only sat silently by the window. Her granddaughter Emily watched her weaken day by day, and now she understands that this wasn't just a physical issue. But why is extreme fatigue so significant? And how can families accept it? Let's explore this deeper. First, this fatigue leads to isolation. With Margaret, Emily noticed she no longer joined in conversations like before. She used to love telling stories, but now she just sat quietly, sometimes dozing off while Emily spoke. It wasn't that she didn't care. She no longer had the strength to connect. According to the American Geriatric Society, this withdrawal is a sign the body is prioritizing energy for basic survival functions, making communication a burden. Emily felt a sense of loss, but she gradually realized this was something Margaret couldn't control. Second, fatigue reveals the body's limits. Emily once thought Margaret just needed to try harder. A little walk or more food would help her recover. But when she nearly fell trying to stand, Emily saw that pushing her only caused more suffering. Experts suggest that instead of urging effort, families should create a space for rest. Emily started letting her sit still, bringing warm blankets and hot tea, small things that made her more comfortable. Understanding and accepting fatigue in the elderly is a way to make their remaining time more meaningful and beautiful. Emily no longer felt sad when Margaret dozed off. She sat beside her, softly telling stories, even if she didn't respond. For Margaret, Emily's presence was enough. She could still feel the love, even if she couldn't express it. If you see a loved one with prolonged fatigue, don't force them to push through. Stay with them, let them rest and cherish every peaceful moment. That's what Emily learned, and it's what I want you to remember. We just discussed the sign of extreme fatigue through Margaret's story in Seattle, and how her granddaughter Emily learned to accept her fatigue instead of forcing her. Today, let's explore the third sign, cognitive decline or withdrawal. If weight loss is the body losing vitality, fatigue is energy running out, then cognitive decline is when the mind starts to wander. This isn't just forgetting a few small details. It's a profound loss of memory, thinking ability, and even connection with those around them. Imagine a loved one, once sharp and funny, now forgetting your name, repeating questions, or sitting silently in a corner with a distant look. That's what we'll dive into now. Meet Mr. Raymond, 84, living in Boston, Massachusetts. He was once a construction engineer, a brilliant man with an incredible memory. He could recall every detail of the bridges he designed back in the 1960s, the size of the bolts, the type of steel used, even the names of old coworkers. His daughter Sarah was always proud of her father, especially during Christmas family gatherings. He'd sit at the head of the table, sharing tales of his big projects in Boston with an excited voice, while the family gathered around the fireplace, eating gingerbread and sipping hot cocoa. Those moments were Sarah's fondest memories, when Raymond was still the strong, dependable dad she always admired. But about a year ago, Sarah started noticing something wrong. At a recent Christmas dinner, as the family gathered, Raymond suddenly looked around and asked, "Where's little Sarah?" while she was sitting right in front of him, holding a plate of cookies. Everyone laughed, thinking he was joking to lighten the mood, but Sarah saw his blank stare. He genuinely didn't recognize her. She gently said, "I'm right here, Dad," but he just nodded and fell silent, as if her answer wasn't enough to bring him back to reality. At first, Sarah thought it was just minor forgetfulness from aging. Who doesn't forget a few things when they get old, right? She told herself it wasn't a big deal, but then those moments happened more often, and they got worse. A few weeks later, Sarah visited and found Raymond sitting in his armchair staring at the wall. She asked, "Have you had breakfast, Dad?" But he repeated her question 5 times in 10 minutes. "Do you breakfast yet? What day is it? What did you just say?" He used to be the one keeping the family on schedule, but now he couldn't recall the date. Once Sarah handed him the phone to call her brother, but he held it, studied it for a moment, and asked, "What's this for, Sarah?" He'd been the one fixing everything in the house, washing machines, radios, even Sarah's bike as a kid, but now he didn't know how to turn on the TV. Sarah grew worried, but he just smiled faintly, saying, "I'm old. Don't mind it." Yet this wasn't normal forgetfulness. His mind was slipping away from the things once so familiar. Cognitive decline is one of the clearest signs in the elderly during their final year, and in the U.S., it's far from rare. According to the Alzheimer's Association of America, over 6 million people over 65 have dementia, but even without a clear diagnosis, cognitive decline still happens as the body weakens. For Raymond, Sarah didn't know his memory was being hit by deep physical changes. As circulation drops, like we saw with Harold and Margaret, less oxygen reaches the brain, slowing neural function. The brain, like every organ, needs blood and nutrients to work. But when those run low, Raymond started forgetting things that were once second nature to him. These changes weren't just forgetting names or dates. They left him lost in the home he'd lived in for 50 years. One morning, Sarah found him standing in the kitchen, looking around in confusion, asking, "Where am I, Sarah? Whose house is this?" He'd once been proud of that suburban Boston home, where he'd fixed the porch roof, painted the doors, and planted a row of little pines out front. Now he didn't recognize the kitchen where he'd made coffee every morning, or toasted bread for Sarah as a child. She tried explaining, "This is our house, Dad," but he just nodded, eyes distant, as if his brain couldn't process it anymore. Sometimes he'd have brief lucid moments, like when he recounted building the Tobin Bridge in Boston, but then he'd go quiet, as if his mind drifted to some hidden corner even he couldn't find. But cognitive decline isn't just memory loss. It brings withdrawal too, a stark mental shift. Raymond started speaking far less. He used to be the center of every conversation, always with a story to tell, from rainy days on construction sites to fishing trips with friends. But now, he sat quietly in the living room corner, staring out the window, not joining in when the family discussed Christmas plans or daily chatter. Sarah noticed he stopped asking about her kids or retelling the old tales he loved repeating. One afternoon, she brought a family photo album, asking, "Want to look at old pictures, Dad?" But he just shrugged, voice faint. "I'm tired. Maybe later." It wasn't that he didn't care. He no longer had the energy to engage. The fatigue from the last sign, now mixed with his wandering mind, pulling him away from the world around him. In the U.S., this withdrawal often gets mistaken for grumpiness or indifference. Sarah once thought Raymond was just getting crankier with age. One time, she brought a plate of ginger cookies, his favorite since youth, but he snapped, "Leave it there, I don't want it." Sarah felt hurt, thinking he didn't like her baking anymore, but she later realized he wasn't mad. He was too tired and confused to react like before. Experts from the Alzheimer's Association explain that as the brain weakens, emotions get harder to manage. Some become irritable, anxious, or quick to anger. Others turn calm, detached, as if nothing matters anymore. With Raymond, Sarah saw both. Some days he'd snap when he couldn't recall his cat's name, but others he'd sit still, unresponsive, even when the TV blared or kids ran around the house. The impact of cognitive decline isn't just on the person experiencing it. It hits the family hard too. Sarah felt like she was losing her dad before he was truly gone. Seeing him there, no longer the sharp engineer who taught her to fly kites or fix bikes, broke her heart. One night, he called her Mary's, her mom's name, gone 10 years. Sarah gently corrected, "I'm Sarah, Dad." But he just stared, muttering, "Where's Mary? Why isn't she home with me?" She cried, not out of anger, but knowing his mind was drifting to the past, unable to tell now from long-gone memories. In the U.S., where nursing homes are common for cognitive decline, Sarah considered it, but she couldn't bear it. Raymond loved his home, where he and Mary built their family, and she wanted him there, even as his mind grew distant. Science shows cognitive decline can start months, even a year, before the body fully gives out. With Raymond, Sarah took him to the doctor after a serious incident. He forgot to turn off the gas stove after boiling water, nearly burning the house down. The doctor said he had early cognitive decline, not quite Alzheimer's, but from poor circulation and advanced age. Less blood to the brain killed off neurons, and there was no fully reversing it. It made Sarah think of Harold and Margaret. Weight loss and fatigue led them here, and now cognitive decline was the next step in a final journey she couldn't stop. So what can families do when facing this sign? Sarah tried pulling Raymond back by asking about bridges he'd built, hoping to spark memories and keep him tied to the present. Sometimes he'd smile, share a few lines about the Tobin project, eyes lighting up like old times. But then he'd go quiet, as if the memory faded mid-thought, asking, "What'd you just say?" She realized pushing him to recall only stressed him more. Once he got mad when he couldn't name an old coworker, slamming the table saying, "I'm so useless." Sarah hugged him, but knew fixing it wasn't the way. Experts say, instead of forcing, meet them where they are. Accepting their mind isn't what it was. Sarah shifted her approach. She started speaking slowly, gently, retelling old stories without expecting replies. She played classical music, something he loved while working, and saw him nod faintly to the rhythm, though silent. She brought old photos, not asking what he recalled, just saying, "This was when you finished that bridge. You were so happy." He didn't answer, but sometimes he smiled, as if a piece of memory lingered, however faint. Sarah also made a calm space, turning off the TV when it got loud, cutting back on big visits, since noise rattled him. It reminded her of American culture, where families often try keeping loved ones normals by dragging them into activity. But for Raymond, peace was what he needed most. If you see an elderly loved one forgetting more, getting confused, or pulling away from life, don't ignore it. They're not choosing distance, their minds wandering, and their bodies gearing up for the end. With Raymond, Sarah wishes she'd noticed sooner, not just to get him checked, but to see these changes as natural. She recalls days he taught her blueprints, patiently explaining each line, but now he just sits, holding a pen without drawing. This sign showed her that even if he forgot so much, his love for the family was still in there, just unexpressed. Raymond's quieter than ever now, but Sarah sits by him daily, talking about old Christmases when he'd share tales by the fire. She doesn't expect answers, she just wants him to feel her there. Cognitive decline warns that time's running short, but it's also a chance to value even the smallest moments. When the mind wanders, emotions linger, and what you can do is stay close, offering comfort instead of pulling them back. Keep watching, because next we'll tackle the fourth sign, a sharper physical change you can't miss. We just talked about Raymond in Boston, and how his mind wandered through forgetfulness and withdrawal, as his daughter Sarah witnessed. But why is cognitive decline such a crucial warning, and what can families do to stay by their side? Let's dive deeper. First, when the mind fades, communication changes completely. With Raymond, Sarah noticed he didn't respond like before. He used to tell stories fluently, but now he just nodded or stayed silent when she asked questions. Once she shared about her workday, but he cut in, asking, "Where's Mary?" calling her by her late mother's name. Sarah realized pushing him to remember only confused him more. Experts from the Alzheimer's Association advise that instead of correcting, speak slowly, gently, using simple sentences. Sarah started retelling old tales, like the day he built a bridge, without expecting a reply, just to make him feel safe. Second, presence matters more than words. Raymond might forget Sarah's name, but she saw him smile faintly at familiar classical music. Though his mind wandered, emotion stayed. She played tunes, held his hand, and felt him squeeze back lightly, a sign he still sensed her love, even if he couldn't say it. It reminded her that staying by his side wasn't about pulling him back, but being there where he was. Understanding and accepting these mental shifts helped Sarah turn sadness into comfort. She stopped feeling let down by his silence. She sat close, shared stories, letting him feel at peace. If you see a loved one confused or withdrawn, don't force them to recall. Stay with them patiently, create a familiar space, because even if words fade, feelings endure. That's how Sarah stood by Raymond, and it's what I hope you'll try. We just talked about the sign of cognitive decline through Mr. Raymond's story in Boston, and how his daughter Sarah learned to accompany his mental changes. Today, let's explore the fourth sign, frequent infections and slow healing. If weight loss is losing vitality, fatigue is energy depletion, cognitive decline is a wandering mind, then this sign shows the body's protective shield is weakening. This is when small illnesses become major threats, and simple wounds no longer heal as they once did. Imagine your loved one, who rarely got sick, now constantly coughing, feverish, or a minor scratch that just won't heal.
That's what we'll dive into now.
Meet Mrs. Clara, 79, living in Phoenix, Arizona. She was once an elementary school teacher, a healthy woman who rarely missed work due to illness in her 30 years of teaching. She loved the dry, hot desert climate, often tending to her small cactus garden and watering plants each morning. Her daughter Lisa lived a few blocks away and would visit, bringing homemade iced tea, a drink Clara enjoyed sipping in Arizona's heat. But about a year ago, Lisa started noticing changes in her mother. One summer day, Clara was coughing dryly when Lisa arrived. She said, "It's just a cold, don't worry," but it lingered for a week, then two, without stopping. Lisa thought it was just the weather, but then Clara caught another cold just a month later. At first, Lisa didn't think much of it. Clara was old, and who doesn't get sick now and then, right? But then the illnesses came more often. One time, she had a urinary tract infection, UTI, something she'd never had before. Lisa took her to the doctor, who prescribed antibiotics, and she improved for a few days. But less than 2 months later, she had another UTI, this time with a slight fever and fatigue. Lisa grew worried, but Clara just smiled, saying, "I'm old. It's normal for the body to weaken." However, this wasn't just normal weakening. Lisa started noticing other things. A small scratch on Clara's hand, from brushing against a cactus, didn't heal after 2 weeks. It turned red, slightly swollen, and even with ointment, it wouldn't scab over like it used to. Frequent infections and slow healing are clear signs that an elderly person's immune system is weakening. And in the US, this is very common in the final year of life. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention (CDC), pneumonia and urinary tract infections are top reasons for hospital stays, among those over 65. With Clara, Lisa didn't know her mother's body was losing its ability to defend itself. As we age, the immune system stops producing enough white blood cells to fight bacteria or viruses. Poor circulation, as seen with Harold, Margaret, and Raymond, reduces blood flow to tissues, making wound healing harder. For Clara, that scratch wouldn't heal because oxygen and nutrients weren't reaching it fast enough. These infections weren't just one-offs. After the second UTI, Clara got pneumonia in winter. Lisa heard her coughing harshly over the phone, and when she visited, she found her mother in bed, breathing heavily.
She didn't have a high fever like younger people might, just a warm forehead.
But Lisa noticed she was more tired than usual, eyes dull, unwilling to eat. She took her to the clinic, and the doctor said it was mild pneumonia, prescribing stronger antibiotics. Clara recovered after a few weeks, but Lisa saw she was noticeably weaker. She stopped watering her garden, just sitting inside, looking out at the yard through the window. Lisa thought it was just a temporary after effect, but then Clara had a skin infection months later, a red spot on her leg from shoe rubbing, which antibiotics didn't heal quickly like before. In the US, the healthcare system often treats cases like Clara's with drugs and hospital stays, but Lisa began to see antibiotics weren't as effective anymore. The doctor explained that as the body weakens, its response to medication drops. For Clara, each infection seemed to last longer, and she needed more recovery time. Lisa once thought regular doctor visits would be enough, but she didn't expect this was a sign her mother's natural shield was fading. Per the CDC, the elderly in the US are 3 times more likely to die from infections than younger people. And for Clara, these small illnesses were now major threats. Slow healing is a concern too. Lisa noticed small wounds on Clara's hands or feet didn't just heal slowly. They'd easily flare up again. Once, she got a sore on her heel from lying down too long, something she'd never had when healthy. Lisa applied lotion, but the sore stayed swollen, forcing her to call a nurse. The nurse said it was due to poor circulation, with blood not reaching the damaged skin to heal it. In the US, pressure sores are a serious issue for less mobile elderly. And with Clara, prior fatigue had her lying down more, worsening things. But what's striking is that infections in the elderly often aren't obvious. With Clara, Lisa realized her mom didn't get high fevers or cough violently, like she'd expect. Instead, she just got more tired, more confused, once asking, "Lisa, is it summer? Why is it so cold?" Though it was midwinter. Experts say in the elderly, infection signs can just be mental changes, like confusion, rather than typical symptoms. This made Sarah think of Raymond. His confusion might have tied to silent infections the family didn't catch. The impact of this sign isn't just physical. Clara used to pride herself on rarely being sick, but now she avoided going out, fearing illness. Lisa saw her refuse neighborhood walks, saying, "I don't want to get sick again." This weakness stole her joy, and Lisa felt helpless as her mom grew more dependent. In the US, where independence is a big value, this decline makes elderly like Clara feel like burdens, even if they don't say it. So what can families do? Lisa tried ramping up treatment, taking Clara to the hospital whenever she got sick, using stronger antibiotics. But she saw it didn't stop infections from returning. Once, Clara said, "I'm tired of the medicine, Lisa," and she realized healing wasn't a realistic goal anymore. Experts from the American Geriatric Society suggest that as the body weakens, shift to comfort care. Lisa started keeping her clean, using skin lotion, and ensuring she drank enough water. Small things to lower infection risk more than pushing drugs. If you see an elderly loved one getting sick often or wounds not healing, don't brush it off. With Clara, Lisa wishes she'd noticed sooner. She recalls days Clara watered her garden, smiling brightly while sipping iced tea. Now she just sits inside, weaker each day. She's a sign the body's shield is crumbling, and understanding it helps you offer comfort instead of a pointless fight. Next, we'll tackle the fifth sign, a final change you need to know. We just talked about Clara in Phoenix, and how frequent infections and slow healing showed her body's shield weakening through the worried eyes of her daughter Lisa. But why is this sign so critical, and what can families do when facing it? Let's dive deeper to understand more. First, constant infections are a clear sign the body no longer responds well to treatment like it used to. With Clara, Lisa noticed that even with regular doctor visits and strong antibiotics, her mom only improved for a few days before the illness returned. After each bout of pneumonia or UTI, Clara recovered slower, weaker, and sometimes more tired than before the drugs. Once, the doctor looked at Lisa, sighed, and said, "Whole body isn't fighting well anymore. We can only ease the symptoms." That's when Lisa started realizing treatment wasn't a long-term fix. According to the American Geriatric Society, when the immune system weakens severely in the elderly, drugs only buy time, not reverse the natural decline. Lisa once hoped the hospital would fix her mom, but she slowly saw that battling endless infections just wore Clara out more, physically and mentally. Second, slow healing shows the body's giving up its ability to repair itself. Lisa noticed the sore on Clara's heel wouldn't heal despite daily lotion and careful bandaging. A visiting nurse explained poor circulation meant blood wasn't carrying enough oxygen and nutrients to the damaged area, and this couldn't be fully fixed. Lisa recalled earlier signs. Weight loss drained her strength, fatigue cut her movement, all leading to a point where her body couldn't regenerate. Experts advise that instead of healing at all costs, families should prioritize comfort. Lisa started using moisturizer, wiping her down with warm water, and propping her feet with pillows to ease pressure. Small acts to make her feel better, rather than forcing her body to do what it couldn't. Shifting from curing to caring is how Lisa turned helplessness into love. She stopped pushing Clara to take pills when she shook her head, or rushing her to the hospital when she whispered, "I'm so tired, Lisa." Instead, she sat by her, poured a glass of iced tea, something she still liked, and softly talked about her teaching days, though Clara only smiled faintly. Lisa realized keeping her comfortable, clean, and calm mattered more than stretching out a fight with illness. If you see a loved one sick all the time, or wounds lingering, don't just think of curing, care for them gently. Create a warm space, because when the body's shield breaks, the most precious thing is the comfort you bring. We just covered the sign of frequent infections and slow healing through Clara's story in Phoenix, and how her daughter Lisa learned to shift from curing to caring to bring her mother comfort. Today, let's explore the fifth sign, major changes in breathing or circulation. If weight loss is losing vitality, fatigue is energy running out, cognitive decline is a wandering mind, and infections are a weakening shield, then this sign shows life's rhythm slowing down markedly. This is when breathing gets labored, hands and feet grow cold, and the body seems to prepare for its final stop. Imagine your loved one breathing unevenly, skin paling, or their hands cold despite a warm room. That's what we'll dive into now. Meet Mr. Walter, 88, living in Detroit, Michigan. He was once an auto factory worker, a rugged man with calloused hands from years on the assembly line. He loved Detroit's frigid winters, often sitting by the fireplace in the small wooden house he'd lived in for 40 years, telling his son Daniel stories about the cars he built, from Ford Mustangs to Chevrolet Impalas. Each evening, Daniel stopped by after work at the mechanic shop, bringing a hot bowl of soup, usually potato with onions. Walter's favorite in Michigan's icy weather. Those visits were always warm, with the crackling firewood and Walter's voice ringing out, recounting factory days with pride. But about a year ago, Daniel started noticing changes in his father. One winter evening, with snow thick outside the window, Daniel arrived to find Walter in his armchair, breathing slower and shallower than usual. His breaths were uneven, pausing for a few seconds, then a deep inhale, as if struggling for air. Daniel asked, "Are you okay, Dad? Should I open a window?" But he just nodded weakly, his voice so faint Daniel had to lean in to hear. "I'm just a bit tired. It's fine." At first Daniel thought it was just Detroit's harsh cold. It could tire anyone, especially an older man like Walter. He was 88, and who doesn't slow down a bit in winter, right? But then Daniel noticed more odd signs. A few days later, sitting by the fire with his dad, Daniel heard Walter's breathing shift strangely. He'd breathe fast for a few seconds, then slow abruptly, almost stopping, before resuming in fits and starts. Daniel, worried, asked, "Do you feel short of breath? Should I take you to the hospital?" But Walter shook his head, saying, "No need, I'll rest and be fine." Daniel wasn't reassured, but Walter was always stubborn. He'd refused a doctor for the flu years back, insisting, "I can handle it." Yet this wasn't just fatigue or a cold, it was a sign his respiratory and circulatory systems were failing badly. Something Daniel didn't grasp right then. Major changes in breathing and circulation are among the clearest signs in the final year of life, and in the U.S., and they're often noted in the elderly, as the body enters its last stage, per the American Heart Association. AHA, heart failure and chronic lung disease, are top causes of death for those over 80, accounting for over 30% of deaths in recent stats. With Walter, Daniel didn't know his father's heart and lungs were slowing irreversibly. When the heart can't pump blood well, oxygen doesn't reach the body fully, making breathing tough and uneven. A pattern called Cheyne-Stokes respiration, alternating fast and slow breaths with short pauses, started showing in Walter. Daniel noticed it more at night, when he slept. Deep breaths, then a stop that jolted Daniel, fearing he'd stop breathing, only for him to inhale again, as if the body was self-adjusting in its final moments. But it wasn't just breathing, circulation dropped sharply too, and Daniel felt it in small but alarming signs. One freezing night, with the outdoor temperature below 0 degrees Celsius, Daniel took Walter's hand to help him closer to the fire and flinched. It was ice cold, though the flames glowed less than a meter away. He asked, "Are you really cold, Dad? Should I get another blanket?" But Walter smiled faintly, saying, "It's okay, don't worry." Daniel wasn't convinced. He wrapped a thick wool blanket around him, but when he checked again, the hand stayed cold. He saw not just his hands, but his feet were cold too, and the skin on his fingers, nose, even earlobes, began paling, sometimes faintly blue. AHA. When circulation weakens, the body prioritizes blood for vital organs, like the heart and brain, cutting flow to limbs and skin. For Walter, this explained why he felt cold in a warm room, and why his skin paled. Blood wasn't flowing evenly anymore, focusing on essentials to keep him alive. These changes made Walter more uncomfortable trying to move, even for simple things. He used to walk from his chair to the kitchen for water, or to stir Daniel's soup, but now a few steps left him panting, pausing to catch his breath. Once, he tried grabbing a spoon a few steps away, but sat right back down, hand on chest, saying, "Daniel, get it for me, I can't make it." Daniel noticed he breathed through his mouth more, as if his lungs couldn't pull air through his nose. Walter once walked the neighborhood each morning for the paper, no matter how cold, but now he just sat still, staring out the window at Detroit's snow-covered streets. Daniel thought it was just age and harsh winter, but later a doctor explained his lungs were pooling fluid, a common heart failure sign in U.S. seniors, making breathing even harder. In the U.S., using home ventilators or oxygen is growing common for cases like Walter's. Daniel had seen oxygen machine ads on TV while watching football with his dad, and asked, "Want to try it, Dad? It might help you breathe easier." But Walter refused, saying, "I don't like those machines, let it be natural." Yet as his breathing grew more broken and strained, Daniel convinced him to see a local hospital doctor. They confirmed end-stage heart failure and weak lungs from long-term oxygen lack. They suggested a home oxygen machine, and though Walter disliked it, he agreed to try for a few days after Daniel pleaded, "Do it for me, Dad." Daniel saw improvement with the tube. No more long breath pauses, but his breathing stayed shallow, and his limbs cold, showing circulation couldn't fully recover, even with medical help. This sign's impact isn't just physical, but emotional and mental too. Walter used to love storytelling, his voice vibrant talking about factory days or football games with Daniel. Now he spoke less, each sentence broken by shortness of breath. One evening Daniel asked, "Remember the Mustang you built, Dad?" He only managed. "Back then, so cold. Nice car," before stopping, breathing hard, hand on chest. Daniel felt sad, but knew his dad couldn't tell tales like before. In the U.S., where families often lean on medical tech to extend life, Daniel once thought oxygen or drugs would bring Walter back, but he soon saw his father's life rhythm was slowing, and nothing could fully change that. So what can families do with this sign? Daniel tried encouraging Walter to sit up, breathe deep, thinking movement would help, but once, he coughed violently trying to stand, scaring Daniel into helping him sit back. He called the doctor, but they said it was natural. Walter's heart and lungs weren't working well, and heavy intervention would just tire him more. EHA experts advise focusing on comfort over forcing effort. Daniel started keeping the room warmer with extra firewood, using a humidifier to ease breathing in Michigan's dry cold. He propped pillows high behind his dad to sleep better, since lying flat made him cough more. Daniel brought warm soup each night, though he only ate a few spoonfuls, reminding him of Clara, when Lisa too learned care over cure. You see a loved one struggling to breathe, with cold limbs or pale skin, don't dismiss it. It's not just winter or age, it's life's rhythm slowing, signaling time is short. With Walter, Daniel wishes he'd noticed sooner, not just for a doctor's visit, but to see these changes as natural. He recalls days Walter sat by the fire, telling tales with a strong voice, warm hands holding his. Now he just sits quietly, breaths fading, hands cold under blankets. This sign reminds us the body's preparing to stop, and understanding it lets you bring comfort instead of panic or futile fixes. Keep watching, because next we'll dig deeper into facing this change. We just talked about Mr. Walter in Detroit, and how major changes in breathing and circulation showed his life's rhythm slowing down, through the concern and care of his son Daniel. But why is this sign so important? And what can families do to face it? Let's explore deeper. First, when breathing becomes labored, and hands and feet grow cold, the body no longer needs much energy to function. With Walter, Daniel noticed his dad couldn't walk or tell long stories anymore. Once, he gasped just to sit up straight, and Daniel realized pushing him to move only made him suffer more. According to the American Heart Association, when the heart and lungs weaken, all efforts should focus on comfort. Daniel started using soft pillows to prop up his dad's back, easing his breathing, and a humidifier to make the air fresher in Detroit's dry cold. These small things brought comfort that oxygen machines couldn't sustain long term. Second, presence matters more than intervention. Daniel once thought machines would save his dad, but when Walter rejected the breathing tube, he switched to sitting beside him, holding his cold hand. Walter didn't say much, but Daniel felt him squeeze back faintly, a sign he still sensed the love. Experts advise that as life's rhythm slows, the peace from a loved one's presence is the best medicine. Bringing final comfort is how Daniel turned fear into love. He stopped panicking when Walter paused breathing briefly, instead gently tucking him in, sharing tales of factory days. If you see a loved one struggling to breathe, or with cold hands, don't just think of treatment. Stay by them, keep them warm, create a quiet space. Because as life fades, comfort is the last gift you can give. We just talked about Mr. Walter in Detroit, and how major changes in breathing and circulation showed his life's rhythm slowing down, through the concern and devoted care of his son Daniel. But why is this sign so critical? And what can families do when facing it? Let's dig deeper to understand how to bring final comfort to loved ones in this stage. First, when breathing grows difficult, and hands and feet turn cold, the body no longer needs much energy to function like before. With Walter, Daniel saw his dad lack the strength to walk or tell long factory stories by the fireplace each night, as he once did. Once, he panted just to sit up for a glass of water, and Daniel saw him so tired he had to lie back down right after. He'd thought his dad just needed to try harder, but when Walter coughed hard after a few steps, Daniel realized forcing movement only made him more miserable. Per the American Heart Association, when the heart and lungs weaken to this point, effort should focus on ease rather than prolonging strain. Daniel started using soft pillows to prop up his dad's back, helping him breathe less heavily while sitting, and set up a humidifier to keep the air less dry. Vital in Detroit's harsh cold, he added a wool blanket too, though Walter's hands stayed cold, but at least he stopped shivering. These small acts brought comfort that oxygen machines or drugs couldn't maintain long-term. Second, a family's presence outweighs any medical intervention. Daniel had hoped machines would save his dad, convincing Walter to try a breathing tube, thinking it'd bring him back to his old self. But when Walter refused to keep it because it was too uncomfortable, Daniel saw his dad needed him more than those devices. He switched to sitting by him each night, holding his icy hand, recounting old memories. Walter didn't say much, often just nodding or smiling faintly, but Daniel felt him squeeze back when he mentioned fishing trips by the lake. Experts say that as life's rhythm slows, the calm from a loved one's presence is the best remedy. He doesn't heal, but soothes loneliness. Daniel knew that though Walter couldn't say much, he still felt the love in each hand clasp. Bringing final comfort is how Daniel turned his fear of losing his dad into complete love. He stopped freaking out when Walter's breaths paused briefly, instead gently tucking him in warm, adjusting pillows, and whispering, "I'm here with you, Dad. If you see a loved one breathing hard, hands cold or skin pale, don't just think of curing. Stay close, keep them warm. Create a quiet space with familiar sounds like crackling firewood, or old songs they loved." As life dims, comfort is the last gift you can offer. And that's what Daniel did daily for Walter. He just covered the sign of major breathing and circulation changes through Walter's story in Detroit, and how his son Daniel brought final comfort as his dad's life slowed. So far, we've gone through all 5 signs: weight loss, fatigue, cognitive decline, infections, and breathing changes, each a subtle signal the body sends in its final year. But the question is, what can families and communities do to support loved ones in this stage? We'll explore the vital roles of those around them, from family presence to community strength, especially in the U.S. context. Let's step back a bit to the Thompson family in Denver, Colorado, briefly mentioned in the intro. Eleanor, 85, is Susan Thompson's mom, a once active woman who loved hiking trails around the nearby Rocky Mountains. But over the past year, Susan saw her mom weaken through each sign. She lost weight despite Susan cooking her favorite meals, grew too tired to leave bed, forgot her grandkids' names, fell sick often with infections, and lately struggled to breathe with cold hands and feet despite a warm house. Susan once thought doctor visits would suffice, but she slowly realized the end-of-life stage needs more than medicine. It needs love and support from those around her. The family's role is central to bringing comfort and meaning. With Walter, Daniel stayed by his dad every night, holding his hand, sharing stories, and keeping him comfy with small things like high pillows or warm soup. Susan did the same for Eleanor. She stopped pushing her mom to walk or fix those signs. Instead, she sat beside her, playing Colorado folk songs Eleanor once loved, recounting old hiking trips. Eleanor spoke little, but Susan saw her eyes light up at John Denver's Rocky Mountain Hive, a sign she still felt it, though her body couldn't respond. In the U.S., of where individualism often leaves the elderly living alone, family presence like Susan's and Daniel's is precious, ensuring loved ones don't feel isolated in their final days. But families can't always manage alone. For Susan, caring for Eleanor got heavy while juggling work and her own family. That's where community steps in. In the U.S., the hospice care movement has grown strong, with over 1.5 million people using it yearly per the National Hospice Association. Susan contacted a Denver hospice group after a doctor's suggestion. Nurses and volunteers came to the house, helping Eleanor with a humidifier when breathing got tough, showing Susan how to keep her skin clean to avoid infections, even chatting with her about mountain hikes, making her smile. Susan felt relieved, not carrying it all alone. And Eleanor got professional care while staying home, what she always wanted. Community isn't just medical services, it's the people around you. In Detroit, Daniel got help from the local church Walter once attended. Volunteers dropped by, bringing dry firewood to keep the fireplace going, singing hymns he loved, though he just lay listening. In the U.S., the churches and charities often play a big role in supporting end-of-life families, especially in industrial cities like Detroit, where community bonds through faith run deep. Daniel felt warmed knowing his dad wasn't forgotten, and those visits eased Walter's loneliness, even if he barely spoke. Another U.S. community aspect is pre-planning funerals, increasingly common. Susan joined a hospice meeting to discuss Eleanor's wishes. Eleanor had said she wanted burial near the Rockies, with a simple ceremony featuring folk music. Susan noted it down, and though tough, she felt peace, knowing her mom would go as she wished. Daniel did the same with Walter, asking his wishes when he was still lucid, and he said, "Bury me by the factory cemetery, where I worked my whole life." This planning not only eases later family stress, but honors loved ones, a trend encouraged by groups like AARP, American Association of Retired Persons. Family and community together weave a support net, not just physical but emotional. Susan realized that though Eleanor weakened, she wasn't alone. Hospice and neighbors pitched in. Daniel felt it too when the church brought warmth he couldn't provide alone. In the U.S., where modern healthcare can overshadow the human touch, blending family and community strikes a balance, letting the elderly pass in love rather than isolation. If you're caring for a loved one at life's end, don't hesitate to tap community help. For Susan it was hospice, for Daniel the church. Stay by them like Daniel and Susan did. Be there, listen, and seek support when needed. Family and community roles aren't just caregiving. They turn final days into meaningful time, leaving cherished memories over regrets. Next we'll talk about preparing practically and mentally for this journey. We just covered family and community roles through Eleanor's story, in Denver, with Susan's support and help from those around, plus Daniel with Walter in Detroit. But spotting signs and finding aid is just the start. How do families prepare for the end-of-life journey, practically and mentally? Today we'll explore how to get ready for this stage, not just to ease stress, but to make those last days meaningful. In the U.S. context, let's revisit Jack, Harold's son in Montana, met with the weight loss sign. As Harold weakened through each sign, from dropping weight, fatigue, to frequent infections, Jack saw his dad's time was short. At first he focused on daily care, cooking soup, taking him to the doctor, hoping he'd improve. But when the doctor said Harold had end-stage kidney failure, Jack knew care alone wasn't enough. He had to prepare for the inevitable. It started with practical talks, a key but tough step. Practical prep means tackling specific issues. Jack sat with Harold one quiet afternoon, when he was still alert, asking, "What do you want me to do if you can't decide anymore, Dad?" Harold, though weak, was clear. "Don't keep me in a hospital long, Jack. I want to stay home near the mountains." Jack wrote it down, then contacted a Montana hospice, a popular U.S. choice, with over 50% of seniors opting for home care per the National Hospice Association. The hospice team came, showing Jack how to use a humidifier when Harold struggled to breathe, supplying pain meds as needed. Jack also turned to AARP, American Association of Retired Persons, to download a living will form, a legal document letting Harold pre-decide treatment, like refusing a ventilator, if things worsened. It wasn't easy. Jack choked up signing it, but he knew it honored his dad's wishes. Susan in Denver did the same with Eleanor. After contacting hospice, she asked her mom about end-of-life wishes. Eleanor whispered, "Bury me near the Rockies, and play folk music, okay?" Susan recorded it on her phone, both to keep and ensure she'd follow through. She reached a local funeral home to pre-plan, a growing U.S. trend that cuts later costs and stress. Susan felt lighter with it all set, from burial spot to favorite songs, though tears fell thinking of that day. But prep isn't just practical. Mental readiness matters too. Jack saw that beyond logistics, he needed to hold on to memories with Harold. He brought a small recorder, capturing Harold's deer hunting tales from Montana, though his voice was weak and halting. Once Harold chuckled, recalling missing the biggest buck, and Jack cried watching it back, the last time he saw him that happy. In the U.S., saving memories via photos or videos is growing common, and and Jack found it a way to keep his dad in his heart, even after he's gone. Susan did likewise with Eleanor. She snapped photos of her mom by the window, gazing at the distant Rockies, and recorded her humming a favorite folk tune. One night Eleanor held Susan's hand, saying thanks for being here, and Susan knew these memories would be her mental lifeline through grief later. Daniel in Detroit learned this too, recording Walter's brief factory tales, though he managed only a few lines before breathing hard. Those short clips became Daniel's treasures, reminding him his dad's love lingered, though his body couldn't hold on. Mental prep is also about acceptance and letting go. Jack struggled with losing his dad. He wanted Harold well again, though impossible. But when Harold held his hand, saying, "I'm proud of you," Jack knew his dad was ready to go, and he had to let him rest peacefully. Susan felt it too. As Eleanor slept more, she sat by, whispering, "I love you, Mom," learning to accept this as her mom's final journey. In the U.S., groups like AARP urge open talks about death, helping both sides prepare, though it's tough in a culture that often dodges loss. If you're with a loved one at life's end, prep practically and mentally. For Jack, it was asking wishes and saving memories. For Susan, planning and keeping her mom's voice. Contact hospice, set a living will, and preserve precious moments. That's the gear to not just get through but cherish this journey. Next we'll hit the conclusion, summing up all we've learned. We've traveled a long journey together, from the first sign with Harold in Montana, through Margaret in Seattle, Raymond in Boston, Clara in Phoenix, Walter in Detroit, to the Thompson family in Denver. Each story is a piece, showing the final year of the elderly isn't a surprise but a series of subtle signals the body sends. Today, in this conclusion, I want to recap those 5 signs, highlight how we can turn sadness into love, and leave a message for you, watching this on YouTube. First, we had Harold, losing significant weight, his body no longer holding vitality. His son Jack thought it was just aging, but later saw it as the first sign of kidney failure. Then Margaret, with extreme fatigue and weakness in Seattle, energy drained, and Emily learned to let her rest instead of pushing. Subtle next, Raymond in Boston, with cognitive decline and withdrawal, a wandering mind, and Sarah found ways to join him rather than fix it, too said. Then Clara in Phoenix, where frequent infections and slow healing showed her shield weakening. Lisa shifted from curing to caring. Finally, Walter in Detroit, with major breathing and circulation changes, life's rhythm slowing, and Daniel brought final comfort. These 5 signs aren't just physical shifts, they're reminders time is finite, but also chances to act. Jack recorded his dad's deer hunting tales. Emily sat with Margaret watching rain. Sarah played music for Raymond. Lisa poured iced tea for Clara. Daniel held Walter's hand by the fire. Susan in Denver did too, saving Eleanor's songs, preparing for her passing in love. In the U.S., where busy lives can blur family moments, these small acts turn sadness into love, leaving memories over regrets. My message is pay attention and prepare. If you see an elderly loved one change, whether weight drops, fatigue lingers, memory fades, sickness persists, or breathing falters, don't ignore it. Early awareness gives you time to be with them, talk, save memories, and plan their passing as they wish. In the U.S., resources like hospice or AARP are there to help, but your presence matters most. Like Jack hearing Harold say, "I'm proud of you," or Susan, when Eleanor held her hand. Those are moments nothing can replace. This video isn't to sadden you, but to spur action. Turning sadness into love means accepting the end-of-life journey as natural, using the time left to make meaning. I hope you find something useful in these stories. From Montana to Detroit, Rockies to Seattle rain. Now your turn of these 5 signs. Which do you think matters most? The stories of Harold, Margaret, Raymond, Clara, Walter, and Eleanor mirror life in the U.S. today, where lifespan rises but the end stage often gets overlooked in the rush. Harold's weight loss in Montana hints at elderly malnutrition, where systems like Medicare sometimes offer quick fixes like vitamins over full care. Margaret's fatigue in Seattle shows the pressure of U.S. independence culture, making elders like her hide weakness while busy urban communities rarely notice. Raymond's mental drift in Boston reflects rising dementia, with over 6 million affected per the Alzheimer's Association. Yet families like Sarah often lack early support due to costly nursing homes. Clara's infections in Phoenix illustrate illness risks for seniors in harsh climates, where hospice, though common with 1.5 million users yearly, needs earlier use. Walter's breathing struggles in Detroit highlight widespread heart failure, while Eleanor in Denver shows pre-planned funerals easing family strain. The lesson: don't wait till the last minute to act. Notice small signs like Jack recording his dad's voice, Susan saving mom's memories, or Daniel holding his dad's hand. Simple yet meaningful. In the U.S. today, use hospice, AARP, and church communities like Daniel and Susan did, paired with personal presence, to turn sadness into love, ensuring loved ones pass in comfort, not alone. If you find the stories of Harold, Eleanor, and the others meaningful, hit subscribe and the bell to catch how to turn sadness into love in future videos. Thanks for joining me on this journey, and see you next time to explore more precious life lessons.